Yeah, so I guess I'll just start off by like kind of describing what we want to get out of this.
Sure.
Rob and I have been big fans of your work for a little while at least, and with the newest LP, we both fucking loved it, and we'll ask you about that a little bit later. But
Thank you.
um, there's we just wanted to frame this like a conversation. There's no big questions or like we don't want to make this some Charlie Rose shit. Just like just some stuff that we've had on the back of our minds that like we feel like you might give us a little insight on.
Mhm.
So if that gels right with you, then we can kind of proceed from there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just curious, like, to learn more about Mutant Beat Radio. What's the deal?
Oh, Ali, you want to field that one?
It was mostly just an internet radio that we started about 10 years ago with a few friends of mine. So we mostly just shifted to doing interviews. And it's been relatively quiet for the last little while. So it's something that I've been wanting to pick back up. And I felt that there was no better guest to pick that back up than yourself.
Cool. Are you guys both from Toronto?
I am not. I'm from San Francisco area, Bay
Oh,
Area.
nice. Do you live there now?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, cool, cool.
Yeah, I've lived there pretty much all my life.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, Ellie and I know each other from a couple mutual interest groups, and then like you're like very close to Toronto, isn't that right? You as
Oh,
well.
Oh,
okay.
yes. I'm actually technically not in Toronto. I am in Hamilton.
Oh, nice. Close enough. Whatever.
Close enough. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, we wanted to. Ali told me to start off with this one, which is, what's the best food on Danforth?
Okay, the answer to that question, and it's I don't even have to think for a millisecond, is a place called Athens Restaurant, which is different from Athens Pastries. Athens Pastries is kind of like a more popular uh, kind of cafe that serves, Greek spinach pie, spanakopita, stuff like that, and it's
Okay.
it's amazing. But Athens Restaurant is a spot that's a little bit further east than the main kind of tourist strip
Uh-huh.
of Greektown, and it's been there since the 70s. My dad's good friend who he grew up with, it belongs to his family, and this guy named George runs it now, and it's become this kind of cult restaurant in Toronto. I think it's the only true kind of Greek restaurant on Danforth. The other ones are good, but they're different. This is the kind of place where, up until COVID at least, you'd go into the kitchen and look at the specials and stuff like that. It's just got
Mhm.
this insane atmosphere. It's so charged with like character, and I don't know. It's an absurd experience to go in there, but the food is insane. So anytime anyone asks me where to go, I just say go straight there.
You go straight to Athens. Athens
Yeah. Oh
restaurant
yeah.
then.
It's like it's beyond a restaurant. It's a crazy like a lot of I've kind of grown up in the hospitality world with, my grandfather owned a place. My dad is a contractor and built a lot of restaurants and nightclubs. And a lot of the people that I grew up around who were big chefs or whatever that I worked with or anything, they would always say the same thing too. So it kind of gives you it's
Uh,
very much a neighborhood spot where you'll see these crazy guys from the corner who are yelling and swearing all day at the saying fuck this, fuck that, and then they'll be in there saying fuck this, fuck that, but then you'll have some like world class chef sitting beside him eating too. So it's like a crazy mix of high and low, and it's just a wild place.
that's awesome. I bet you get like guys like playing cards and stuff like that in there.
Exactly. It's
Or
yeah. There's so many stories about that place too. It's a gem in this city for sure.
yeah. Um, it's really interesting that you mentioned kind of Toronto's history and stuff like that. I think it seems like it to be like a city, at least from my perspective, where there's been a lot of like rapid change in the past couple of years, and
Yeah.
certainly in the time that like from what I've talked to Ali, like he's seen things happen there too. How since did you grow up in Toronto or did
I
you?
did. I did. I'm from this neighborhood.
Oh shit.
I've my dad lives down the street from me, but I've been in and out of Toronto over the past decade. I'm from here, but when I was in my early 20s, after I graduated from university, I just kind of got fed up. Like I've been in the music scene in Toronto since I was a teenager, and by the time I was in my early to mid 20s, you get that kind of frustration and that the longing to go try something else or whatever. And I went and lived
Right.
in London, England for a few years, and then I was living in the States, touring in bands and producing records and stuff like that. But I moved back here in 2022, so not last year, 2 years ago now,
Mm.
and I've been here since then. And yeah, it has definitely changed a lot in the past decade for sure, but it's a we could talk about this forever, but it's a strange. I honestly think Toronto is a very strange place.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd also say that Toronto's a very strange place. It's a very unique place, and in the sense that it very much relies on its um various cultural identities that it draws from, and it really puts that forward. But there's also a part of me that feels as though it's lost a bit of that diversity of its identity. It's become a little more homogenous in a sense in the last few years.
Yeah, I can feel that for sure. It's also strange because I agree with everything you just said, but it because of Canada, last I checked, has less people in the entire country than there are in the state of California. And I think the stat is that like 80+% of the population of Canada lives within a 2-hour drive of the border to the States.
Mhm.
So there's all these bizarre, unique sort of challenges or realities about
Mhm.
this massive country that people from outside of Canada don't quite comprehend or understand, and that creates a bizarre set of cultural, I don't know, boundaries and circumstances and stuff, because like you said, when Canada puts forth all of its kind of cultures and stuff as being its sort of identity, um where am I going with this? I don't know. It's a weird place because we don't seem to cherish our past. We have, in terms
Yeah.
of music, we've had some pretty crazy stuff in this city, but we just tear it down and move on and don't talk about it. Whereas in like Chicago or New York or London, you have these kind of monuments where we're discussing this is where house music started. This is where whatever played in 1969. Here we just move on, we just throw it out. And you can see that with architecture, you can see that with
Mm.
music venues, you can see that with all this stuff. So I brought up all those statistics to say that so many people live in Toronto. It's, people say it's like the New York of Canada. So we have that in this city, but we don't really you know talk about our past too much culturally, and that just creates another bizarre set of circumstances culturally.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Yeah, it does feel like they began to chase the New York of Canada moniker a bit too hard.
yeah.
Yeah, it it desired its high-rise condos over like historical sites. So like hell, they tore down fucking Second City for Christ's sakes.
And they're about to tear down the Ontario Science Center by the looks of it, which is, a wonder of the world to me when it comes to brutalist architecture. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I'm just curious. Having been in the Toronto music scene, in and out mostly for the last 16 years, what would you like? How would you classify, uh, Toronto's metamorphosis as well as your own development and metamorphosis
I'd
within
say
the music
more
scene?
at, I'd say more at large, like the first half of that question. Um, I guess to answer both, but uh, before I answer both, I should say, Toronto is, again, I think I'm getting this right, but I think it's the fourth largest city in North America. So you've got Mexico City, LA, New York, and then Toronto. So the greater Toronto area. So this is a huge city, right? But
Yeah.
it can very much feel like a small town socially and
Hmm.
culturally. And again, this goes back to what we were just talking about with regards to just the way that things are set up in Canada. But it
I was
and
talking with
that has
Sean.
what's
Oh,
that?
sorry. I was
Go
talking with
ahead, go
Sean
ahead.
earlier, and I made the remark that Toronto's like the world's largest fishbowl in a sense.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, something like that, for sure. And it has that has its pros and cons when you're, trying to do something with music or whatever, right? So I would say that I've done so many different things within music. I've been in bands, I've played guitar in bands, I've produced records, I've produced jazz records, I've produced house music, blah, 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 blah. I say all this to say that even through doing all of that and moving between these worlds and roles, it still feels small. I'm still 15, 16 years later bumping into the same people I was bumping into when I was 15 years old, and
Wow.
that's that has pros and cons, which I mean, I'm sure that happens in many cities, but when I first kind of got into Toronto's music scene, there was some cool stuff going on for sure. This was kind of before the 2010s. Like Toronto really seemed to come into some new form of identity, or let's just say maybe a renewed sense of like branding of itself in the mid 2010s. I feel this was when Drake really started to bring Toronto slang and mythology into his music, and the Raptors started doing good. There was kind of maybe some kind of an economic boom going on. This is when I was actually not living in Toronto, and I came back, and I could really feel it in the air. But before that, there were still these pockets of kind of underground stuff that were happening, and there were possibilities in the air at that time. I'm talking like the late 2000s that I don't feel anymore. There used to be events called extermination nights where people, 2 or 3 people who were responsible for them, would find empty warehouses, slaughterhouses, Kodak film factories, weird bridges, these weird industrial spaces, and then they would send out an email to an email list and say, this is happening tonight. There's a lineup of this band, that sax player, this whatever dance crew, whatever it is, and we'll send you an email at 11 p.m. And then with the address to this location, show up at midnight. So there were these cool things happening on a monthly basis. That was the kind of world that I came into, and it felt almost like, I don't know, it felt like I said, there was just possibility there. There were so many different things going on. And there seemed to be more venues to play if you were a young band. I was probably 16. I was probably 17 or 18 when I first kind of entered this world. And there were a lot of young people doing cool stuff. They're doing, when I say cool stuff, like crazy music. There was like no wave bands type of bands made up of like 8 teenagers with 3 sax players. One of my bands was one of those. We had 2 sax players, 2 drummers. We were trying to be like the Fall or something. But I don't see that happening right now. I don't know if it's just trends or whatever, but it doesn't seem to me that that exists, and there aren't many places to even play. We used to play at Silver Dollar Room. We used to play at Rancho Relaxo, Sneaky D's. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just not interested in this type of thing, but I don't know if a band that sounded like the Birthday Party made up of 18-year-olds with 2 sax players was happening in my city, I'd probably know about it, but I don't know. So there's a main difference there. I'm kind of out of that world, the kind of more indie rock world, for various reasons. That was kind of like a period of my life, whatever. But yeah, I could go on about this forever. So I don't even know where I'm at with the answer to your question. That's part of it, I guess.
I just wanted to dovetail into your point. I feel like having grown up in the Bay Area, there used to be a lot of stuff around the early to late 2000s, and certainly kind of the early 2010s, where there was a lot of venues to play. And then I think as San Francisco grew up, and certainly with what happened to Ghost Ship, they started like really cracking down on a lot of these like spaces, all ages venues, the warehouses and stuff like that, because Oakland Fire Department and SF Fire Department would basically shut them down if you didn't have, proper fire safety, which was, a bit of an excuse to stop partying, essentially,
Right.
stop the kids from partying. And I think, yeah, just because it's due to a whole bunch of different factors, but it seems like that also plays into what you were talking about in Toronto, where there seem to be far less spaces now for young kids to kind of get up there and go jam than there were certainly 20 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it could be an economic thing. It probably is all of these things. There's no one answer to any of these things. There's technological factors at play. There's socioeconomic factors, all this stuff. But I do think that just in general, the tides have kind of shifted with regards to the role that music plays in society and young people, everyone's lives, not only young people at this point. This was still the era of MySpace and forums before everything kind of got channeled into Reddit. So we'd have our own message boards for the kind of underground music world in Toronto, a thing called Steel Post, which was pretty interesting and cool. MySpace was definitely a more conducive platform to building communities with music. And being in a band or putting together a CD or a CDR, a tape or whatever of your project and getting it out there into the world was very much an identity building activity as well as a musical or creative one. Me and my friend Gary, we would make these records in my basement, and then we just get it out there because we wanted to show people what we were about, what our taste was like, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So it just seems that maybe things have shifted towards something else with regards to identity building for young people, which is inevitable with the way that tides shift in culture and information technologies and stuff like that.
Totally. I'm also think like it either happens these days, it either happens on Instagram or it doesn't at all. Like
Exactly.
that seems to be like how like many of the like bands that I find out, and certainly kind of how we, at least Ali and I were preparing for this interview. It's like, oh, let's go check his Instagram, which was like totally, it's a trip, man. You got a really cool design identity. I gotta say.
Thank you.
Ali, you want to talk about Bad Boy?
Yes. Yeah, like as we were saying, your design identity is completely on point. Mixing this sort of like 80s pastiche with like just various influences from local Toronto commercials, whether it be from Lastman's Bad Boy, or I noticed when you dropped it was a specific Instagram post posting phone numbers. You dropped the fucking pizza.
You
number.
got that?
Yeah, I got that. I know
Nice.
927-1111.
Yeah, I don't know. Like when I'm making these posts, it's usually I wake up, I have a lot of coffee, and then I just blast whatever, whatever I have to promote. I just find a way to do it, with a healthy dose of absurdity and, with my tongue in cheek for sure. I just, I used that okay, so I never had Instagram for like a personal account. I got off of Facebook in like 2013, 2012. I've always had a problem with portraying myself online in like a serious manner. I never thought you could. I just thought it was so fucking goofy to just create this digital avatar of yourself in earnest and parade around, as if it was something serious. That's just not the way I look at the world. I think it's stupid, and I've always been kind of not, I guess, uncomfortable with it. It just feels goofy to me. So I really wanted to find a way that I could exist on the internet and use social media to promote my music and to stay in the loop. I like following artists and stuff like that I like. So I'm not against social media. It's annoying, but I part of what you guys are saying, or what people say to me about maximum exposure, is that it has such a vibe or an identity or whatever. And yeah, I mean, obviously that's a curated, intentional thing, but on the other side of it, it's really not. I don't know what to do, So I have a Dropbox folder filled with shit that I'm like scanning clothing tags. I'm scanning matchboxes from Danforth cafes in the 90s, like Greektown cafes.
Yeah.
I just have so much shit in these archives. I just post stuff and write the pizza phone number and whatever, laugh it off. But so yeah, half of it is me intentionally trying to cultivate an aesthetic, but the other half of it is just not knowing what to do on the internet.
100%. I feel like we were talking before, like where does Anthony start and Tony begin? You know what I mean, and vice versa.
That's a good question. I honestly, that's something that I contemplate a lot, and I don't know. I think that the quote unquote Tony Price identity is just like almost a satirical, cartoonish, inflated image of certain elements of my personality and my kind of taste profile,
Mhm.
Like I've always loved cars since I was a kid. I'm not like a car nut or whatever. Like I don't even know how the fucking engine works. I just like them aesthetically. So, that has just become part of the aesthetic or whatever. It's funny because people come up to me when I'm playing and stuff now in Toronto, and it's like, Tony, blah, 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 blah. And it's hilarious. My sister just like sends me texts when she sees people writing about me, or my mom sends me things, and everyone's just like kind of laughing at me, being like, what the hell is this shit? I don't know, man. Like, I don't know where the line is. I don't like put on a persona like a fucking Batman Bruce Wayne thing when I leave the house, I'm like going to dark Tony mode. It's like I don't know. it is what it is, but I don't know the answer to that question really. Maybe there is no line. Maybe I am a caricature of something. I don't fucking know.
It was really funny because Ali mentioned this last night where we were trying to prepare for this interview, and he's like, "Yeah, Tony's entire personality as he portrays it online is like small to mid-level tier coke dealer, like with like
It's
a girl."
hilarious because
Yeah,
someone said that to me the other day. I was wearing these like these Gucci loafers that I spent $50 on. It's not like I'm fucking Tony Montana or something. They're like
yeah,
huge
yeah.
loafers. Someone's like, "Wow, look at this guy, fancy. Looks like a big cokehead." I'm just like, I've never sniffed coke in my life. I fucking barely drink because I'm driving because I live so far. It's like I'm not that. I am so not that. You know.
Yeah. But there's no harm in playing with that sort
Yeah,
of thing
exactly. I
to
mean, I think Tony Montana looks fucking incredible.
yeah, he's sick, obviously. So like
Mhm.
it makes sense from that perspective to like take something, and it certainly I think blends into a lot of that at least with like the your last couple albums, like a lot of that kind of sleazy, a little bit like underground, sort of like house music that you're like more focused on putting out these days.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wanted to segue a little bit and kind of talk about a couple of your last albums, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'd love to.
So we uh, you put out you've been putting out a whole bunch of stuff like almost every year, which is really sick. And then the stylistic stuff has changed, I think, from when you started like making electronic music in 2018, from doing like kind of tape loopy hazy stuff to more pretty straight, I wouldn't say straightforward, but like more recognizable house and electro and stuff.
Mhm.
um and what kind of led you in that direction, if anything? Because it seems like it's very easy to kind of get stuck in one mode, but you seem like you want to play with all sorts of different sounds at once.
Yeah. I'm like half of my identity, to go back to that point, half of my, in identity, my sort of my inclinations towards certain types of music or my listening habits. I'm halfway between really liking song-based music, stuff that's very much about the song form, songwriting, and structure and stuff. And then the other half of my tastes are very much about free form stuff. I was looking at my Spotify Wrapped, and it's like half of it is like 60s folk rock, and the other half is some kind of avant-garde jazz or experimental minimalism or something. And
Yeah.
I think that I like to oscillate between those two poles in everything that I do, whether it's as a music fan or a music producer, a music creator. I think there's a middle ground between those two poles as well that I sometimes find myself operating in. But yeah, I mean, it's funny you asked that because the past few weeks I've been trying to finish records that I'm going to put out in 2024, and one of them is a really really long, I don't, for lack of a better term, ambient record. It's very much tape loops and stuff that's slowed down and very much about texture, and it's about sounds, and it's about the let's just say it's about the process of making it. What I mean by that is I used old samplers with low bit rates, and I used old tape machines, and I really tried to emphasize the sort of textural side of sound with this project. But then on the other hand, I'm making the most straight ahead kind of speaker busting club music I've ever made, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to do with these things. So yeah, I mean, I think that what keeps me interested here as a producer or an artist is trying to answer that question. What side of this sort of question or line should I pursue, and how should I release this to the world, and how should I portray myself in this regard? So yeah, I don't know. Your question was, how did I end up towards the more traditional club oriented sounds of the last record or whatever?
Hmm.
The answer is just that I love that stuff. I always have. That's like the first music I ever really heard as a child. My parents were
Really?
Yeah.
Ho- ho-
I very much grew up on freestyle and electro and funk and stuff like that. My parents were huge into that. They were going to clubs in Toronto and on Danforth in Greektown. My parents, my aunt and uncle would go down to Florida and record the Miami-based radio station tapes and bring them back, and we listen to them in my uncle's Toyota MR2, blasting it, just like the bass just erupting the seat as a kid. And my mom and my aunt were huge into R&B, and they would record the WBLK, I think it was, from Buffalo, and the Quiet Storm. That was kind of what I was raised on mostly, you know. And then when I started to become older, more of it's, you know, entering my teen years or whatever, this was when, like, you know, this was when EDM was starting to show itself, which is just like something that I fucking hated. And you know, that whole world just like
Oh,
turned
you
me
too.
off
Yeah.
of contemporary club and dance music. And I just was so repulsed by it that I kind of just wanted nothing to do with that world. And, you
Mm.
know, even wanting to, I didn't want to make anything electronic, you know. I started using GarageBand and making music electronically before I did anything when I was in high school. But then I became more infatuated just out of being a rebellious, idiotic teenager, of being like, fuck all this, whatever, people wearing fucking native headdresses and glow sticks and shit. Like, I don't
Go
want
to
to hear this shit.
Tomorrowland.
Fucking, yeah, to
Go to
whatever.
EDC, Governor's Ball,
Yeah,
like forget
wearing
it.
fucking mouse helmets and shit. I'm just like, this is pissing me off. And then, you know, I got really into 60s psychedelia, garage rock and stuff like that. And I just really wanted to learn how to record music in a way that was so against all of that stuff. So, anyways, yeah. And again, then I started a band when I was in university, and all the stuff we made was like very much inspired by Sun Ra and everything, you know, just more the ambient side of stuff, the more freeform stuff that I was talking about earlier. But anyways, yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know if this answers your question. I don't remember where we were at, but yeah.
No, all good. Do you look back on that stuff fondly, or is it kind of like something you'd rather put behind you?
I fucking hate most of it. You know, I really I the early stuff that I made with my friend Gary, I really do like. It was really weird.
Mm.
We were very much trying to make something very abrasive. We were very much into bands like Public Image Limited in the fall and
Mm.
Nuggets, garage rock, but we met in a jazz class at university. So, like I said, we had two sax players, we had two drummers, and we were pretty wild. And that stuff, I'm proud that I did that. You know, I'm proud of
Mhm.
everything I've done. But again, once things started to oscillate a little bit more towards uh more song oriented stuff, I really just like I I'm repulsed by a lot of it. A lot of people like that stuff, but I don't want to hear myself sing, which is the big part of it. But you know, that all of that stuff was an exercise in record production. I can look back on this and see that I didn't really want to be a rock star. I never wanted to be that type of person. I never wanted to be in a touring cool guy band. I just wanted to make records. So I used my guitar playing and songwriting and the stuff I did with friends as a vehicle to learn how to make records, because I still think that at the LP or an album is still kind of a definitive expression of for this musical form. And
Mm.
it was something that's what I see that as, looking back. It's just experiments in record making, which have
Hmm.
brought me to, you know, somehow have a career in this.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that with the LP is certainly, you know, something that like is can be viewed as like a complete body of work, totally, and a complete expression of an idea. But I also think there's a lot of room, especially in dance music, I feel like for the single and
Hmm.
for an A and a B side, as to, you know, putting out something that's quick, maybe fast, but also um, can express some kind of idea in a much shorter fashion. And it seems like a lot of the tracks you've been making recently are more, you know, a bit more direct and more to the point. But I wanted to talk a little bit about IBM Contro, because I feel like it's baffling to me that like I heard about this record from a friend, and you know they were like, oh, you should check out this guy Tony Price. He's got this album on Lies, and I'm pretty familiar with Lies. I've been kind of going to techno shows for a long time, and the cover entranced me, dude. I gotta be honest. Like, how did you think about that? Because it looks like I was talking to I was talking to Ali last night. I was like, dude, this looks like a BBS board, like one of the old like
Yeah.
where's.nfo
Yeah,
files,
yeah,
like
yeah.
where they, you know, some cracking software for something. So,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
no, yeah, I was just like, what were your ideas behind it?
I've been thinking a lot about that album recently because it took me a long time to make that album. It was very much a situation where I had a full-blown kind of almost visual concept just enter my head in like maybe
Hmm.
2018 of this really dark cybernetic type of music that took I wanted to basically blend Detroit techno and jazz fusion from the 80s, but without the sort of signifiers, let's just say, of either of those genres. It
Hmm.
started off being a largely and like completely devoid of beats. That record, it was very much a miserable, like noirish kind of moody.
Pulsating synths and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It wasn't until the very end that Ron Morelli from Lies suggested we throw some more dance floor oriented feeling onto it. But it was very much I I was really into reading about the birth of the internet and sort of like parapolitics stuff, and I was very much getting into learning the truth about, you know, the surveillance state of the Western world and learning about the military roots of the internet. And it just
Hmm.
created this really specific feeling within me to learn this stuff. And it became this musical vision that I had. And that record is so conceptual. It's almost like a prog rock record to me in that it's like
Yeah.
concept album. And I never got to really express that because there's no music press to really talk about this with. And if there was, they weren't interviewing me, that's for sure. Lies Records is very much an underground kind of electronic music label. So they do things, or Ron does things in a very specific way where, you know, the album comes out and it speaks for itself. There's no press campaign or press kit or anything like
Or
that, which is
they don't
cool.
make you interview, you know, Kerrang or whatever it is. Yeah.
Exactly. But there's such a rich, I'm not saying rich in a good way necessarily. I'm just saying there's so much depth of thought that I put into that record over the course of 5 years. You know, every song
Hmm.
title on there is an abbreviated code word for a surveillance program, a cybersecurity program or something that the United States was behind. A lot of that stuff came out through like WikiLeaks cables and whatever. And I was so
Hmm.
into this, and I just wanted I wanted it to be this very conceptual record. So the cover definitely speaks to that. But yeah, I that record kind of came and went, and it is what it is. I'm sure that it'll, you know, speak for itself to people who find it. I hope it does. I just re-listened to it recently and I really still like it, which is a good
Yeah.
sign.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, what I was when, you know, during our brainstorm session, I was like, the track titles, you know, people, you know, there's a lot of easy, I guess the easiest, uh, with regards to the surveillance thing that you specifically mentioned, the easy
Mhm.
comparison, I guess, with that sort of thing is war games, or like, you know, the little Michael Mann thief sort of
Right,
action with
right.
regards to how it sounds. But when, like, the last track on the record, Room 614A, that reminded me a lot of The Conversation. I don't know whether you've ever seen that
I
movie, but
have, yeah. That's
yeah.
interesting that that's the last track too with the sax. I never thought about that.
Yeah, oh yeah. No, well there you
Cool.
go. Yeah, and he destroys his whole room and
See,
just playing
that's the
saxophone.
headspace I was basically in. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, dude, well, I'm glad we got that. But yeah, no, you know, you know, hearing how menacing some of these tracks were, and then kind of comparing it to, like, you know, this quasi idea of complete technological surveillance is something that I feel like a lot of techno and a lot of like electro that come out these days adopt a grubby aesthetic, I think, by nature of how they sound, and, like, you know, the packaging, or how the, you know, the label, the spindle looks, etc. But not a lot of records really take the time, I guess, to explore like a concept like yours did. So just
No, for sure. I thank you for picking up on that because that was, again, that's kind of what I was trying to embed into it with the song titles and stuff. Because what drew me to Detroit techno when I was young was exactly that kind of cybernetic theoretical angle to it, besides the music, obviously. But you
yeah.
know, Juan Atkins, all these guys were very much thinking about these concepts, and you can hear it in the Model 500 lyrics or song
Or like
titles.
Cybertron or anything like that.
Cybertron,
Yeah.
exactly. There's very much this menacing, brooding examination of technology, and I think that still very much speaks to me personally. But I know exactly what you're saying. As with everything in the world that we currently live in, the sort of aesthetic dimension to something is what is replicated and put forth. You see people even kind of doing really raw album covers and stuff to throw back to that era or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there's a record by Gerald Donald from Drexciya and Doppler
Mhm.
Effect called ARPANET, which was very influential to that record. It was very much
Even the color palette's kind of the same. I know what
honestly, yeah, that's probably where that came from now that I'm thinking about it. But that record was definitely an example of what you're explaining. It has this, it's undeniable in its musical expression. It's funky as hell. It sounds incredible. It's melodic. It's everything you would ever want from that type of music. But
Mm.
there is this dimension of like dread and cybernetic dread, I should say, to
Yeah.
it. It's just lingering around the peripheries of all those, snare hits and stuff. And that record just blew my mind when I heard it. I was just like, this is exactly the essence of what this music is about to me. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. It's where I grew up, we're pretty close to the first couple of terminals for the ARPANET. I'm fairly close to like SRI and UC Berkeley and stuff like that. And those were all the
Yeah.
primary, like, essentially data points for that entire network. And I don't want to go too far deep into this, but there's a lot of technocratic, technologic dread that I've always found lurks very thinly underneath the surface of a lot of what you might like encounter on a day-to-day basis if you work in tech.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing, man. There's a lot you can go back on, and SRI was making weapons for the government during the Vietnam, and
Yep.
they got implicated in the Pentagon Papers, etc. So
Mhm.
a lot of there's the webs of conspiracy flow deeply, and they also flow. They have a lot of breadth, and you can totally drive yourself insane looking at all this different stuff, which I think is
E-
really cool.
Exactly. I did drive myself insane looking at this stuff. That's what happened.
So yeah, I think with that, how did you decide to turn it on its head and then make, a very jovial, maximalistic record like Hit Piece?
Honestly, the main point that the main reason that happened, now that I'm thinking about it, was the fact that I started DJing again. I was
Mm,
I for many years I was very much against live performance of any kind. I couldn't, I was, like I said before, referring to stuff I did when I was a teenager and whatever. I don't. I've all. I have such an inclination towards recorded music and studio created music. I don't. I
mm,
don't really care about live music. I don't go out and dance. I'm not into the party scenes and the dance music scene. I don't like going to anything really. So I was very much like, I'm just going to continue producing records. I don't care about any of this stuff. Blah 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 blah. And I had DJ'd a lot when I was younger. Like when I was 20, 22 years old, I'd be playing I'd go out and DJ with a Space Echo. I'd play all types of shit like French funk, whatever. I just different stuff. And I was very much into that. I never really played many dance floor specific kind of venues at that time because, like I said, I was very much out of touch with the world or whatever. I was still listening to like fucking Stevie B and all this other freestyle stuff that my parents were playing, but there was no kind of space for that in my scene at that time.
uh-huh.
So I stopped doing that. I stopped playing live. And then once I moved back to Toronto, I just started going and buying records again. And because I finally had somewhere where I could store them, because I'd been basically living a very nomadic life abroad until that point. So once I got back into basically record digging and buying stuff, I was just like, my God, I missed this a lot. And I
Mm,
started DJing again, but with a emphasis on, or sorry, with the intention of playing in nightclubs. And I started doing that a lot in 2022 for the first time in years. I had played a bunch in New York too, places, and it was very fulfilling to me to do that. But once I started doing this, I started finding myself making music that I could slide into my DJ sets.
yeah.
And I started kind of realizing or recognizing what was and wasn't working for dance floors in terms of production stuff, what snare drums, what kick drums, how I'm mixing this song, how I'm arranging it, and in terms of genre and stuff like that. And I started to find a way where I could use DJing as a sort of means to express what I was doing in the studio, but in the real world. So now I look at DJing kind of like a way to contextualize my music, in that I'll play old stuff, old, New Jersey house, New York house, Chicago house. I'll play stuff from the 80s and early 90s, and I'll play stuff on Lies. I'll play, Benedek. I'll play Ron Morelli. I'll play newer stuff that also fits in this kind of continuum. And then throughout the set, I'll just put in my own music. A lot of stuff is unreleased. No one knows it's me, and I'm just kind of feeling it out. So that's very much the reason why I decided to put out a record of that nature. And it was very well received. A lot of people really liked that that sound, or they like that sound, that kind of no nonsense, almost minimal song oriented approach to dance music, something that Inner City would have done. I like
Yeah.
that idea, and I really liked the idea of early Daft Punk before the robot shit, where it was very much raw and rude, but half the stuff those guys were doing was very much oriented towards the idea of a pop single, and I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I kind of wanted to make a record that had that almost rock and roll pop attitude to it, but was very much oriented towards what I was doing when I played at clubs.
Yeah, going back and listening to each of the tracks on there from a fan's perspective, it's like each of them is almost like an ode to a different style of house music, and like you said, it's very no nonsense. I mean, you have uh the arpeggiator in it's a No Control sounds like dead on, like it's from Frankie Knuckles' Your Love, like and Physique sounds like Todd Terry, and there's some tracks on there that's very French, that's like super French Dutch. So it's really gratifying to be able to hear a record that takes a no nonsense approach to, like, these tracks are for the club, like, and they're great to listen to. It's great to like run around and do the put it on and go do other stuff, but like they really shine when in the context of like a DJ set. So I'm glad that you're playing them out, and I'm glad that you
Thank you.
have a new appreciation, I suppose, for doing DJ stuff.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
it's
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. And it seems as though the tracks from hit piece especially have a certain amount of accessibility. Seems as though every single person that we show these tracks to, that just regardless if they are into dance music or not, just go crazy for them. Especially the
Totally.
first track, total Tony, just like
That one's a funny one. That one's like that. I made that a long time ago, maybe 2017, and I it was just so ridiculous. I was, like, I'll never put this out. That's just too much. And then I wasn't gonna put it on this record. I was showing some of my close friends. I showed my sister. My sister's like works. She's a director, and she does a lot of stuff in New York City. So she's like, she's very much a visual person, and she's just like picturing people hearing this song. She's like, "Don't put that shit on your record." And I was like, "Oh God, I know." But then another friend of mine's like, "You have to." It's like it's hilarious, but it's also so yeah. I don't know. It's an absurd track, but I do think it's nasty and funky enough that the ridiculous kind of humorous angle to it doesn't become a joke. It's like
Yeah.
almost like when I listen to it, I hear like The Time or something, just like some Morris Day ridiculous funk. So I was like, okay, there's something here, and it worked. People start chanting that when I play now, and I'm just like, oh God.
You started something, you can't put the genie back in, but
I should
yeah.
also say, like, when you were just mentioning that people like those songs, I'm very grateful that they even listen to them. But even with the Lies record and this one, it's important to remember, for me at least, that the label that put this record out, Telephone Explosion, they're an eclectic label, yes, but much of their fan base and their success has been in the more quote unquote indie rock world. And they're not really a dance music label. So I wanted to make sure that I kept that in mind while making this. And that's kind of when I bring up songwriting or a song oriented approach. I didn't want to put out a record of like 9 minute, just raw 707 drum beats or something, because I wanted to keep in mind that I'm trying to make a living here, that I want,
Yeah, fair
I'm,
enough.
I'm just trying to remember that, I don't have to, I can do anything. But for this specific label, it would probably be a good move to retain a more, put out an LP instead of an EP, because that's very much what the world that this label's operating in is still very much comfortable with that format. Try and fit dance music into this format and share it with these people, because I come from that world as well. I also operate in that and produce records in that world too. So, and with Lies, it was the inverse of that. It was very much they have a reputation for being something specific, and I think that what Ron really liked about my work that I showed him and that record was that it was kind of the opposite to what people were usually expecting, I guess, at the time. The Lies has put out some unbelievable music in terms of like LPs. There's one called KWC 92. I don't know if you guys have heard that. Kowloon
No.
Walled City. It's just
Oh,
it's a
uh,
fucking incredible conceptual, almost like ambient house record. It's astounding. That was a huge inspiration for me. But putting out that record on that label, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put some crazy like free jazz elements into here. I'm gonna get some sax all over it. That's something that I think might take these people by surprise a little bit, and I think it worked in that regard. So again, I try to I try to anchor myself down and stick to being a creative person when it comes to making art or making music or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But half of this job, for anyone in 2024 is to also be the marketing department for your own music. So you have to
yeah,
be able to split the duties here, and it is important. Some people are still very much stuck in this kind of modernist myth about like the artist as the important whatever, blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, it's like I want people to hear this music. I want people to dance to it. I want people to buy it. I want people to see it and hear it. Like that's why I do it. I obviously I enjoy doing it for myself, but it's important to remember and honor that dimension here, because for a long time artists complained that they didn't have control over how their music was released into the world, and now you have that control. So figure it out.
hell yeah. No, I almost wonder if you and Ron were even talking about, because I know Ron put out his LP of which name I'm forgetting, but um I saw him on tour for it, and it was all like very even more stripped down kind of house than even you were going for, which is like he even said kind of on record, he's like, I'm doing this stuff because I like the early track singles and I want to kind of bring that thing back. Do you think there's kind of like a renaissance, I guess, or maybe like fixation in modern dance music on these very old, or not very old, but like 1980s, late or early 90s kind of like foundational house tracks, or is that something that you haven't gotten?
I think that are you talking about Heartstopper, Ron's record from last year?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one.
That the I love that record. I actually think that that's like amazing example of representing the sort of elemental form of house music, but doing it in a way that has appeal. Ron
Yeah,
has made records that are like some of the most out there, insane shit I've heard ever in my life. But then hearing this record, it was very much treating house music again as songs, and it has the rawness and the crudeness of of real house music, but he's definitely looking at it in the same way that I was kind of you're describing me looking at my music or whatever.
yeah,
To a renaissance or something, I think that I asked Ron about this actually when he played in here in May, and I was talking to a guy named Trax. I don't know if you know him, Code Nation Trax. I spoke to him on the phone too, and they both said that they've noticed that over the past decade or so of touring the world as a DJ, that trends have changed into a place where people don't want to hear Todd Terry on the dance floor. It's too slow or it's too groovy or something. And everything's kind of been bumped up to this like just dimensionless form of what people are calling techno, but is really just EDM on fucking darker drugs, which is just,
sure.
165 BPM nonsense. And I think that Heartstopper, Ron's record, and the stuff that he's been putting out over the past year or two is a reaction to that. I'm not, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I kind of see it as a music fan or a fan of this label as being a reaction to that trend, slowing things down, reducing the sort of, let's say, sanding off the glossy patina of that garbage that we've been kind of subjected to, and just trying to connect dots again between the past and the present. So I don't know. I'm always down for anything that sounds like a Trax record. It's one of my favorite labels ever. Obviously, it always has been, and I'm down for anything in that regard. I hope there's a renaissance. I've personally noticed that I made it. I made it a very specific rule or intention of mine when I started DJing in Toronto again, to align myself with other people and other venues who would be okay with something that's not a 165 BPM, whatever, fucking
Yeah.
bad ecstasy trip. I don't want that. I'm into like sexy music. I'm into funk, I was raised on fucking Kashif. I want to hear this stuff. And I've noticed that people are very receptive to it. If you can contextualize this sound and play it to the right people in the right room, people really love it. So again, I think it's up to people like Ron or whoever, myself, that are out there trying to do this, to do it in this way, in that create a type of music, contextualize it for people, and just keep going with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but something along those lines is where I think he is at, or where the world of this music is at.
Yeah, no, totally, it totally does. I have, I'm really curious as to like what your creative workflow is like. Is it all hard? I mean, your records sound like they're all hardware, but I'm not, with like how much of what you do or what you've, how much of the tracks you make is like just hardware jams versus like, how much does software play into it? Or do you like hoard gear, or are you just like fuck all that, or what's that all about?
I've got I've got a decent amount of gear. I'm definitely not a gearhead. My studio space, I don't like to have a lot of things out. I'll keep a sampler out and a drum machine, and I have a rack of synths beside me. And to be honest, I don't know if it's 50-50. It's probably 50-50 in that I do start a lot of my ideas on a piece of hardware, a sampler or a synthesizer or a drum machine, and then I'll move it into the computer. I'm not a big jammer, you
Mm.
know. I don't I don't set up like 15 synthesizers and press random buttons and whatever comes out comes out. Sometimes I do, and it starts an idea, but again, I'm coming to this from the approach of being a songwriter in a way, in that I'll start a groove, and if I'm feeling the drum groove, I'll immediately put that into Ableton, and then I'll come up with a bass line, or I'll start playing around with chords, or I'll get a guitar out and find something, or I'll start hitting samples in the sampler and just build a song from there and then arrange it. So very few of my ideas, I mean, I'm also talking shit because half the stuff I do is actually drum machine beat downs that I'm just chopping up after. So I don't know. It's half really. I
Yeah.
I hate technology, I hate gear, but I also love it. I really can't stand gear culture. I hate the fucking synthfluencer world of Instagram and YouTube. I hate
Those guys are
shit
pretty
like
noxious, man.
it's
Like,
insane. It's insane. I think that it's become so gamified too. It's like teenage engineering and all this stuff. It's like people treat this like it's fucking Game Boys and stuff, and it just like
yeah.
pisses me off. I just think it's corny, and I think it's whack, and I think the more gear you have, the worse your music is in most.
Yeah, dude. And all the people who collect those gears never end up making music with it anyway. Like every, producer I know has like it takes a very specific type of person to own that much gear and then consistently make music with all of it. Like a lot of people just will like let things sit and then sell them to the friends at half price or whatever. That's how
Exactly.
I've gotten a lot of my gear.
Exactly. I'm looking at my sampler right now. I have an Isla Instruments S2400, which is a modernized version of an SP1200, the
Mm,
legendary sampler. Um, I bought this secondhand in New York off a guy who had way too much gear. I went to his studio. It was fucking insane. Just way too much.
whoa.
Just like hoarding
Yeah.
gear. He sold this to me for a very good price, and it really changed my life because it's a perfect marriage of old and new, in that it retains the sort of restrictions and sonic characteristics of an old piece of equipment, but it's very fast and very modernized in its workflow. So Hit Piece and everything I've made since then have centered around this approach to sampling, whether that's loops and stuff. But every time I go out and dig for records, I end up with a stack. Every month or so, I'll do a session in my house where I'm just recording, millisecond hits, hi-hats, everything. I'm just building this collection of sounds that I then build records out of. And that comes down to like being obsessed with textures and stuff again. As like I've produced a lot of records. I'm like a Juno and Polaris nominated whatever producer in Canada. I've worked on a lot of things, and I say that just to say that I've been lucky enough to work as a producer and mix engineer with very expensive equipment. I've been lucky enough to work on an SSL board and stuff like that. And I've over that, 15 years of doing that from a very young age, I noticed a trend in myself and at large of by the time the late 2010s hit, everyone was obsessed with tape plugins and obsessed with making everything sound retro in a very specific way that created its own contemporary aesthetic of this quote unquote retro sound. You listen to like a Mac DeMarco record, that's like the root of this in terms of the more rock oriented music out there. Very, very dry drum sounds that are beefed up with tape plugins. It's a sound that I've come to fucking hate. So to me, it's like I've become so fixated on texture that through doing this stuff, it's almost like the past 10 years of music production have been defined by analog simulation. There's all these this plugin mania with replicating old channel strips, tape machines, and it's become something that's like very much at the forefront of this practice or job is to replicate the past. So
Right.
in I bring all of this up to say that to me, when I sit down to make music, it's mostly that the sounds guide the way, which is why I've become so obsessed with sampling old hits, is because if I'm hearing an amazing snare hit on a house record from 1992, the second I put that into the sampler and then I sit down to make my own song and I hit that snare, it's like everything's there. I don't need to replicate the past anymore because I'm just using it. So
Yeah.
my approach to creativity is very much based on aesthetics. It's very much based on just honing in on a specific aesthetic or an atmosphere that I see or hear in my head. And I'm really just sick of trying to chase it through replicating the past. So I don't know. Very deep philosophical question or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I pulled a quote from the depths of my memory. It's an Eno quote, and he basically I read your interview with Telephone Explosion where you talked about this kind of like machinic unconscious of bringing the past forth, to bear, but not letting it, totally consume whatever it is you're trying to do. And said something like, whatever you now find, weird, ugly, uncomfortable, nasty about a new medium will become its signature later on.
Exactly.
When you have the ability to look back, what do we think about tapes, like the hiss, the distortion, the warbling, the actual fret, the fragility of the medium itself is what everyone really is enamored of right now. As soon as you can, he said, like, these will be this stuff is going to be cherished and emulated as soon as it can be avoided. And
Yeah.
yeah, no, and I just saw it like at once it's tough to like relying on all of that stuff to the point where it's almost self-parody is obviously not great, and makes makes whatever sounds that you're kind of trying to make come out as either cheesy or whatever it is. But um ultimately, like, the other half of it is that you've grown up with that kind of sound font. These are comfortable things to be working with, and like it could end up putting in a new blend if you have the panache to basically say, like, oh, I want to put a little bit of this in there, I want to sample an old hit there, I want to do stuff that's my thing, but using this in a very scalpel like fashion.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. That Eno quote is incredible because it's hilariously true. I just found a free plugin that emulates the artifacts of poorly ripped MP3s. So we're at that point now.
Whoa,
Yeah,
no kidding.
it's a very interesting plugin because you can get really bizarre sounds out of it. I don't know how useful it is to
Can
me.
you
I
What's the
have
name of the
used it.
plugin? I'm curious.
I have to like open Ableton and find it. So it's like a weird like 4-letter word that's not a real word. I will let you know.
All right, sure.
It's cool though, but that's very true. You know, I think something that comes to mind is like productions by Basic Channel, where they were very much emphasizing the hiss or the sort of the the breathing of the machines or the
Yeah.
the breathing
The
in between the wires, you know, and
yeah,
emphasize
kind of
that.
doing this like, cheesy dub delay on
Yeah,
like spring reverb on some of the tracks, especially when you get to like the rhythm and sound stuff, where it's like this is, they're trying to approximate what it sounds like in like another dimension of electronic music, you know what I mean? But they're,
exactly.
doing it with the tools they had at the time in the 90s, which was like, Cubase 3 or 4 or 5 plugins,
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned self-parody because that's kind of how I started to feel about this tape plugin mania sound. It's I can't even if I hear I don't know if it's like comes from Tame Impala, Mac DeMarco, like that whole era just kind of brought this sound to the forefront and then everyone started chasing it. And self-parody is right, man. Like, I don't know. At this point, I'm trying to mix a bunch of music and I'm focusing on some more of the dance floor oriented stuff right now. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do I want this to sound? And I just want it to sound good on a sound system. I want it to really
Mm.
smack through that. So just having that to sort of that goalpost to try and hit is good to me because I can just end up, philosophizing about this shit forever. Just be like, maybe I should do this and emphasize this. And no, if it sounds good in a room with a huge sound system and it knocks through with the bass and everything, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah, that's
Yes.
all that I need. And I didn't really have that until I started DJing again. So it very much helped me just focus on getting it out there because as much as I love as much as I love all this stuff and as much as I spend in my life sitting alone in this room just contemplating the pros and cons of tape emulation plugins all day, it's like at the end of the day I'm not trying to be like an academic here. I'm trying to get into a club at 3 in the morning and make people dance. That's what I want to do at least.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's whatever DJ worth its salt comes to the club to go do.
Exactly, yeah. And I feel that part of this is a whole other conversation, but unfortunately, I feel that because DJ culture has morphed into something that's very much related to the sort of identity brands that people cultivate for themselves, I've noticed that a lot of DJs are less concerned with making people dance as they are with showcasing their own taste, which becomes it doesn't make for a good time, really.
No, that's the number one way to clear out a floor is play something that you really like and have not played for other people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've been there a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's next for Tony Price? Do you have anything in the works that you might be able to share with us or
Well,
be willing to speak about, I suppose?
I have a lot of music that I need to, again, this is where I've been struggling, like I mentioned like 20 minutes ago, is with that line between being the creator of the music and then trying to be the person who kind of pushes it out into the world and markets it and whatever the fuck you want to call it. I'm
Mhm.
struggling, not struggling, I'm just in that zone between those two processes that it's not very fun to be in that zone. It's kind of like gives you anxiety. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
think, what how should I package this music? How should I organize this music? How should this music sound? How should I release this music? What should I do with the music once it's released? When should I release it? What am I trying to do outside of music production that could line up with a record release? Blah, 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 blah. So it gets to be a lot on the mind for me, but I'm trying to continue. I do a live set too, besides DJing, where I play all of my own music in a club as if I was DJing, but I'm using samplers, drum machines, and synthesizers and stuff to create a seamless set as if I was DJing with stems almost and,
Mm.
sirens and whatever. And I've been doing that for a year now in this configuration. It took me a long time to figure out how I was going to do it, but I'm trying to take that on the road. So, like I said earlier when we were talking in this interview, that I was really against live music for a long time. But now that I found a way where I can express what I'm trying to express with this music live, I actually do want to take it live for many reasons. It's something that I think it works out well. I think it services the music in a way that DJing almost doesn't for me. I don't know.
Mm.
I'm trying to take that on the road. I want to get back over to Europe. I haven't been there in a minute, and I'm going to start trying to play shows outside of Toronto. So I want to figure out a way that a record release might lead up to revealing music at around the time I might be playing shows somewhere else. I've kind of, like I said, I used to produce a lot of music and write songs for other artists, and I've kind of stopped doing that. I don't know why. I just don't enjoy doing it anymore. I don't really like, I also just haven't really met artists that I want to do it with. So I'm honestly just going full blast into doing my own music for the foreseeable future. And I don't really want to work with other people in that capacity. It just doesn't fulfill me. And unless there's a reason to do it that's either financial or like spiritual, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, fair enough.
So yeah, I just want to, I have a lot of music. I'm going to do another record with Lies. I was talking to Ron, trying to figure out again what the record's going to sound like there, like thematically or whatever.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm going to keep putting out music. And I think that in 2024, we're in a strange place. The music industry is very weird. And the music press is like non-existent or not servicing people in a way. I'm not talking about artists only. It's not servicing the music listening public in a way that it needs to. It's not showcasing new music. It's not breaking new music. I don't know what it is. It's very weird. Putting out a record last year was very strange because it was really it was a daunting task to figure out what the goal was with promoting a record. Like, 10, 12 years ago, it was like, you have to get it on, you have to get that Pitchfork review, blah, 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 blah. You got to get it or you're not going to make it, blah, 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 blah. Now it's like, I don't even want Pitchfork to write about my shit. They reviewed one of my records and it was like one of the worst Pitchfork. It wasn't even a bad review. He didn't say anything bad. It was just so stupidly fucking written that I was just like, why'd you bother? You're going to compare
Oh,
my music to
man.
Ghostbusters. Like, why bother?
Yeah,
Really?
that review was
That was fucking egregious, dude.
It's just fucking stupid. It sounds like Atari, this, that. It's like, what is this? This like fucking like that was the kind of shit that people were writing in the Panther Press at my high school. This is like the dumbest shit I've ever read. Don't bother.
Book report shit at that
Yeah,
point.
but so anyways, my point in that little rant there was just to be like, what is the goal here, And moving forward, I still don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone does. I read a lot of
Yeah.
interviews and spoke to a lot of people that work as music journalists, that work as editors or previous editors at music websites and blogs and publications, and they're asking the same questions too, because there are a lot of writers who don't have a place to host their writing,
Yeah,
Um,
and who are honestly really qualified. It seems like, with how things are going in 2024, we, at once we got to return to the blogs, because that's
Yeah.
like where it was at, but there's no with how the internet has been compacting over the past, especially 10 years. They don't get the traffic like they used to. And I mean, Ali and I both grew up, and I think you did too, on those, MediaFire rapid share blogs that like, you download a bunch of different stuff, they get a paragraph write up of something that looks insanely interesting or just weird and out there. And then you can, go and grab music from X or Y or Z place. And those are pretty much, gone to the wind. So it's like, where does a music fan that doesn't want to rely on the algorithm go?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the other end of that, where does an artist or a label go it's not even about having a hit record. I mean, anyone who's doing this has long since divorced the idea of making money or a significant amount of money off of music. Like these things don't correlate anymore. So if you're in this for the right reasons or you're in this at all, you just want to get your music out there to as many people that might like it as possible, right?
Yeah.
And when I talk about that, putting on that hat of like being a marketing person or whatever, that's something that I seriously just think about and talk about every day with people. What is the goal here? And I don't know. Is an LP still the move for any genre of music? Some people say the streaming statistics on a single or an EP, sorry, on an EP or an LP, you know, outside of the first song, people stop listening. It's like, who the fuck are you talking about, though? You're talking about some guy like who listens to the Eagles for 40 years, then he hears a song and he turns. I don't know what to say. It's like there's no answer here. No one knows how trends work at this point. It's just bizarre. So I don't know. That's why I'm thinking so much about format. I'm thinking about my own consumption habits. How do I discover new music? Because as much as I am a music producer and an artist, whatever, 10 times the amount of that I am a music fan, you know? And I discover music through NTS. I discover music, a lot of old music through Instagram pages at this point, you know, word of mouth, going into record stores. So I try to think about how I consume and discover music, and I try to think about how I'm going to release music to hit someone thinking in that way. So yeah, I don't know. I guess it's time to use my music to experiment with that kind of thing, you know? What is a single a good idea? Does dance music work better if it's in shorter form releases? Or does it work better if it's in an LP form? I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely feel you on the in terms of like discovering new music. It has a very like it's expanding and contrasting at the same time. I find it's like it was far easier to discover new music during the blogosphere days, during like when you can find some clandestine blog, and I can download fucking something crazy like lol cockfill or
Yeah.
like Idris Muhammad or just the most insane shit in the world. And now it feels as though like we're all connected through these like algorithms of whether they be Spotify, Apple Music, this, that, and the other, or like YouTube Premium, and it, it's just feels far like more cacophonous, far harder to discover something that like really excites you, really ignites that flame in you, where you're just like, holy shit, like I can't wait to like turn this on and listen to it and like experience this. Um,
Undoubtedly. That era was it was something special for sure because of that. It was so brief too, you know? It
yeah,
was it was very brief. It was like a brief spark in time between two, like, I don't know, technological eras or something, you know?
yeah.
I think that it's yet to have been properly spoken about or looked at, because I think that we're now seeing or feeling um what life is like as a music fan in a post blogspot era world, and that I don't know. I don't know. There's so much to say about it, but yeah, I feel you on that front for sure.
You also said we're mentioned crate digging in record stores. I'm just
Mhm.
curious, like, just someone who's been in the area and has done stupid shit like spend his OSAP on records. What's your particular favorite place to like hit up?
I
It
want to know
depends.
too,
It
because if I go
depends
to
what I'm looking
Toronto,
for. Really, it depends. I'm like my record consumption and purchasing habits have definitely changed a lot.
Hmm.
I've sold my entire record collection like several times in the past 15 years. When I first left Toronto, I sold. You know who Grasshopper is? Are you guys familiar with Grasshopper in Toronto?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
He's a Toronto legend, but
Mhm.
when he opened a store on Ossington, I sold him a crazy collection. Like when I worked construction with my dad, like building nightclubs and stuff when I was in high school and university to make money, but I also bought and sold records a lot. So I had crazy stuff. Like this is when I was really into Can and Faust and all that early krautrock cosmic stuff. And I was buying all that and I sold it all to Grasshopper. And I wish I didn't before, but I, I used to buy things more so to own them, whereas now I don't, which is my whole point here, is that I'm very specific with what I buy. And if it's not something that I really want to own or will listen to, or something that I will DJ and play out, I just don't buy it, you know?
Mhm.
And things have gotten expensive. So it depends on what I'm looking for. I do go to Cops Records a lot because they're in my neighborhood. They're the only record store in my neighborhood. And there's a guy there named Ben who used to be a music writer for the Toronto Star, who it used to be a raver and whatever, but they always give him the boxes of DJ collections they buy, and he processes them through this uh this location, and he gives me a peek to everything early. So I will buy stuff from him, 12 inches and stuff. Invisible City, those are my very good friends, and I'm so grateful that they exist and that they operate in Toronto. And to be honest, if they weren't here, I probably wouldn't have moved back to Toronto, just because they're such a central hub and nexus point for so much stuff in this city that we need them. So I love that store. I love their label. I love them as people. They're great. And they're across the street from Sonic Boom, which I will go to here and there. But I only pretty much buy jazz on vinyl or house music at this point. You know,
Yeah.
as much as I want to buy like $80 psych rock 7 inches, I'm just not doing that.
Yeah, yeah, like me and Sean have like often talked about amongst a group of friends of ours, how like the market is incredibly fucked at this point. It seems as though like people kind of strangled the golden goose in terms of physical media because there was a willingness for people to buy physical to still like buy physical media because it was more than just the experience of just like listening to it as this ephemeris thing, you know. There's a particular desire to like actually own like a physical tantalizing
Mhm.
like something that's tactile in a sense, and like like an LP should cost like in terms of production usually costs like 30 to 50 cents, and I'm seeing crazy shit like fucking we're selling Tin Machine selling for
Yeah.
like $80, and it's like what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. I think that I'm this is also something that's very much on my mind is the production of vinyl because not when for instance when IBM Contra came out on Lies and Mark 6 a few months prior on Telephone Explosion, this was a time when during the pandemic, but it wasn't because of the pandemic, but this was when vinyl production went from being a 6 week to 8 week thing to being 9 months to a year to get a record pressed, right?
Mhm.
And now that has come to an end because of these record pressing plants were giving priority to the major labels and pressing
Yeah, I
hundreds
read
of
about this.
thousands.
So, like Taylor
Yeah,
Swift and
exactly. They
fucking
backed
Adele
up
got all the record
everything.
spots.
Oh, the
Yeah,
Dell one, yeah.
Yeah, that kind of dried up, and now we're seeing in the past few months at least a lot of these plants are now like kind of struggling and they're offering packages that better suit people like me or local labels where they will do extremely low runs at a very cost efficient price point with very quick turnaround time. So this opens up new possibilities for small labels and artists to do their own record pressing. And I think, again, I'm a record head like you guys have been buying this shit for 20 years now, and I still enjoy it. I still think it validates the record in a way. And I fight with that idea a lot. I don't know if it's a good thing to think about or if it's even true, but to me it does. So to your point though, like, record store day bullshit and
Yeah,
the price points of stuff, it's proof of music's changing role in society, specifically on the physical side of things. I think that again, back to the idea of an identity brand where people have to, if you want to exist in society at this point, you have to cultivate I guess we could just call an identity brand, which is like a perceived a lot set of alliances, stances, and images that you cultivate for yourself. You say, online, I stand for this cause. I align myself with these celebrities or politicians, and I wear these brands and I listen to this artist, and it creates this almost mosaic or constellation that represents you on the work. When you're looking for work on the marketplace of jobs, the marketplace of dating, these are
the
this is how you
signifiers.
exist. What's
Yeah,
that?
the signifiers.
It's a constellation of signifiers, exactly. And music at this point, record culture is very much. It's not even the use value of a vinyl record. Most people do not listen to these things. Let's just be honest. I don't. I know most people don't. It's not convenient. Sometimes I'll throw on this Harold Budd record I'm looking at once a month tops. It's like the newest thing I got for Christmas, whatever. But people buy vinyl because they like to watch themselves buying vinyl. Do you know what I mean? They like to look at a
Yeah,
record and say, I'm this person because I bought that record. It's very much an identity brand building block at this point, which is, again, you can look at this negatively, positively, neutrally, whatever. But the reason that vinyl is expensive, I really do think has very little to do with how much it costs to make, like you mentioned, and a lot to do with that exact thing. It's the same thing as t-shirts and posters. It's like people want to walk around showing that that they are this person. But vinyl is very much about being, you know, I'm the type of guy who spends $1,000 on a Chicago house record. That's what I am. So I'm gonna do it. It has nothing to do with the use value or the reality of the economy or anything. It's just, again, it's very much about how people view themselves or want to be viewed.
Yeah, I thought that entire like I thought that web of like vinyl hagiography was much worse like 10 years ago than it has become today. But
Yeah.
I'm curious as to like, do you still feel like that's more present, or have people like calmed down, I guess? I mean, I know the pandemic was fucking crazy for like people paying ridiculous amounts of money for, you know, stuff that's never going to be repressed, but it's also like, I don't know. It seems to me
I
like,
still think it's pretty bad. That's
yeah.
my experience, at least, you know. I think that I hate the idea of an LP by a smaller artist being fucking $40. It just really bothers me. I remember going out, you know, not even that long ago in the grand scheme of things here, like a decade ago. You could find White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground reissued for like $14 Canadian. It's just like brand new.
Yeah.
Now these things are like $60. It's fucking crazy. And I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where this stands. I don't know where it's going. I don't know how I want to participate in it, and I'm trying to figure that out. But I don't think anyone knows. So, I mean, for all of us involved, the people who buy it, the people who collect it, the people who make it, the people who market it, all of that, I think this is a very interesting time, and I don't think it's a good or a bad time. It's again, it's I hate the fucking discourse surrounding the music industry right now, where it's all just doom and gloom and stuff. You know, it comes from a very, very ignorant place. People who don't understand how money moves throughout the music industry are complaining about things. And just every time I go out to a show in the more indie rock world or something, it's just like people like, yeah, it's like I'm having a really hard time here making this happen because it's so expensive, blah, blah, blah. Then fucking quit. I don't know what to say, you know? It's like, find a way. We got to find a way. That's what we're supposed to do here.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like,
it seems. Mhm.
yeah, like no one ever made money on this. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, it was like money was never like an option. You know, like you think anyone like when the fucking Toronto scenes, if you've read any of Michael Barclay's books on the Toronto scenes from the 90s or 2000s, like, yeah, no one made fucking money. You think anyone was making fun? You think like Casey Accidental was fucking making money? No, nobody was making money. People were doing it because they had something that people wanted to hear. You know?
Exactly. And again, you know, back to identity brands or whatever, again, it's that people, there's a pressure put on people, I feel, especially in that kind of NPR pitchfork indie rock world. There's a pressure to take a stance that, you know, says everything's terrible, workers' rights, blah blah, are down, blah, we can't make money, you can't make art, everything's terrible, because that's just like the stance you're expected to take. And if you take a stance that says I want to make money off of my music, you're seen as like a capitalist pig or something, you know. And it's, you can look at the world that way, but it's not very fun, you know.
Yeah.
Really not. And it is true, don't get me wrong, you know, we live in like a fucking neo-feudalist technocracy or some shit. It's terrible. In many ways, it's very dark and it's very upsetting, but you can sit at home and cry about this stuff and go out and mope about it. But if you really care, and if this is something that speaks to your soul, you have to find a way. You have to, it's up to people like us who are out here buying records, making records, going out, putting on events. It's up to us to create these new pathways and connection points and stuff. You know, we have to do it. And moping about it and complaining is just laziness. And I don't know, just fucking quit.
Yeah. I'm sick of people posting about it. Go fucking play about it.
Exactly.
Put on a show.
Exactly.
Do something, you know?
Yeah, it is what it is. You know, I'm so fucking grateful. Like I pray to the universe that with gratitude every goddamn day, that I'm so happy that I'm able to make a track that comes into my head in my studio. I can go out into the real world and play it and see people react to it. That alone is just it's the feeling that gives me, whether it's 50 people in a small tiny club, or hearing my song come on the radio for the first time, anything like that, that is beyond any social economic bullshit fucking whatever philosophy that I can analyze the world with. Like, that feeling alone is just enough to tell me that it's worth it to find a way to do this, not only for myself, but it's worth it to try and do things that might benefit the 15-year-old kid I was 15 years ago, and
100.
you
Yeah.
just got to do it.
Yeah, no, there's I've always felt like, whenever I, make like a little track even or anything like that, it's like, the act of creation itself is its own reward, and then being able to share it with other people is like cherry on top, where it's like this was nothing, and then I thought about it and I realized it. I made it something that didn't exist before I had that thought, and only I could have ever made that. You know what I mean? I think
Exactly.
of that a lot, like because, you know, everyone gets in their own heads about, oh, how is this going to sound? And of course, you got to think about that kind of stuff if you have, if you're known for something or known for X or Y or Z. But the act of creation itself is I find really freeing and really just like cathartic in a way that you don't get from a lot of other things.
Exactly. And that point that you just made is something that I think gets lost in the narrative or the culture that's drilled down our pushed down our throats, I should say, in that it like creation is in a way the the base level human impulse, to create is what we are here for in a way. And
Mm.
and you don't have to, just because you make music doesn't mean you have to release it. It doesn't mean you have to succeed. It doesn't mean it has to do anything. But there's this kind of cultural push towards, whether it's like the bleed over from like hustle culture and shit, where it's like put in 10,000 hours and you'll get there, blah blah blah
The
blah.
Jocko Willink mindset: wake up at
Exactly. It's like,
4:30, make tracks for 10 hours a day.
yeah, it's like you're allowed to just make music in your bedroom and then walk away from it and then go to work the next day. You're allowed to do that. And a lot of people, there's a lot of people who don't either realize that or accept that. And that's, again, what kind of a fucking mindset is that? Like, it's definitely seeped into the more hip hop oriented production world. I'll get videos pushed to me, advertisements where it's like, you know, uh how to sit over your MPC correctly so that your back doesn't hurt when you're making 16 beats a day, because Kanye made 5 beats a day per summer, and
What
that's
the
why he
fuck?
succeeded. It's like shit like this, It's just like crazy
There's
stuff.
no way that's real.
It's an exaggeration, but there's shit like that. I swear to God.
That's so uniquely horrifying, dude.
Yeah, I don't
I'd
know where
have,
I'm going with this. Other than that, there's just,
I'd have proper back support as an FL Studio.
yeah, exactly.
No, but sorry, that was funny as hell.
No, we got to someone needs to make like a Spinal Tap type of fucking satire of the music world that we currently live in, for real, whether it's the
God, I
DJ
would
side of
watch
things or
that 30 times, dude. Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like there's been a couple of no, not even that. I mean, there was like what was it, the Pop Star movie, but that wasn't even really the same thing. There's the field is ripe for a mockumentary about DJs,
oh
and
my God.
fucking
Oh my God.
not a fucking EDC one. Like I'm talking like a real one. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, just going on Instagram right now is satire in itself. It's crazy to see people, to see DJ culture and what these people think of themselves. It's just mind blowing to me. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Think they're fucking like Robert Plant or something. It's like you're not like a rock star here. Relax.
Yeah, people around the world are, not gonna know your name, and maybe that's for the best. Like,
Yeah, to
um,
me, DJing is very much a like utilitarian, or it's like plumbing. I said to someone recently, and I was just like, a lot of people they see themselves when they DJ as like an artist, and it has nothing to do with art. It has nothing to do with the purpose, function, or mechanics of what art is or how it operates, and whatever. Fuck art. I'm not even going to talk about this, but it's like you're just playing music for people in a room. You're serving a very similar purpose to the bartender across the room. It's not you can be good at it. There is an artistry to it in that
Mm.
you're creating something out of a vision in your head, whatever. But you got to relax here. You're not, these people.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You're not like concert cellist or what. I mean, no, not even that. It's like, I think people take it very, very seriously. And I think the world of DJing would be benefited by taking the entire thing much less seriously. And I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of DJs that are very, very, highly down to earth and generally good people. And then occasionally you'll run into, whichever, guy played Burgoyne this week and thinks he's hot shit. And
I, I also just it's not it can be a fun thing to do, but it's not like a lot of people, ask, hey, we should play together, it'll be really fun, we should play this local bar, blah blah blah. A lot of people see it as like a fun thing to do on a Friday night. It's become, because it's such an accessible thing to do, I guess, I don't know. And yeah, that can be fun to do, but I don't it's not like, I don't know, I don't find it to be that fun to, I don't know. I wish I
Mm.
could be that kind of person. I don't know, but maybe I'm just being like, I don't know, a pretentious art guy. I don't fucking know. Anyways, yeah, the DJ thing is another 4-hour discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, Ali, do you have anything else? Because I've sort of run out of questions here. I feel like
Oh
we covered a
no,
lot.
I think we've pretty much covered everything. Yeah, I just have to say, like, I saw you live. I think it was 2 weeks ago. At Basement 254.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing set.
Thank you.
You premiered a new track there, like, or you were just doing one of those. You were testing out a new track, and it fucking sounded great, like the rest of your stuff.
Thank you.
So I look forward to hearing that. Yeah, it's been wonderful speaking with you. I
And
can speak. Yeah.
Thank you guys for real. Like, thank you for listening. Thank you for asking me to do this. Like I said an hour ago or whatever, it's very strange to figure out, what you want what you want to do with yourself when you put music out or whatever. So I appreciate the intelligent depth that you kind of brought to these questions and stuff, because it made me think in new ways, and I'm sure that I'll be thinking about this interview for a while. So, and thank you for just giving me the opportunity to kind of explain myself with some of the stuff that I do. I feel that, like we mentioned earlier, the social media and the music industry just don't really offer that kind of platform or opportunity to explain what you're trying to do. And as much as it's about letting art speak for itself or whatever people say, it is nice to kind of go further into it and try to explain what you do, yeah, thank you for that, for real. Thank you so much. And I hope you do pick this up and continue doing this, because, as a music fan as well, I love hearing people that don't get written about or don't have an opportunity to explain themselves or don't usually explain themselves. I love hearing them talk about these types of things. So I hope you do it with others.
thank you, man.
Continue to do it with others, at least.
Yeah, that's our full intention. I imagine you've been very kind on giving us your time, and we've really appreciated the thoughtful answers to everything. And I'm glad we got a couple, like, I had a couple questions in my mind, and it seems like we got all that and more. So yeah, thank you so much for continuing to go out and DJ. It makes it a lot of fun for people to go out and have shit to do on a Friday, Saturday night. And please continue to do that, make music, and stop by the Bay Area sometime if you can, man.
I
I'd love
hope
to see
to.
you live.
I hope to. I hope to this year. So we'll be in touch.
Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Have a good day. And yeah, talk soon.
Yeah, all the best.
Have a good one.
You too.
Fucking great.
Dude, oh man. Oh yeah. That's out of the park right there.